And when the presentation is complete, we're encouraging you to ask questions and share comments and discuss using the discussion panel. We have an excellent presenter who will be sharing their expertise, and I'd like to introduce Christina Holt. She is the Associate Director for Community Toolbox Services. Christina specializes in capacity building for community change and improvement in supporting evaluation of community-based efforts. At the Center for Community Health and Development at the University of Kansas, Christina directs the Community Toolbox, a free global resource which offers 7,000 pages of practical guidance for creating change and improvement and leads the development of the Community Checkbox Evaluation System for monitoring and evaluating community-based efforts. Christina's expertise includes facilitating community processes, including community health assessment and community health improvement, providing technical assistance and training on core competencies for community health and development, and supporting data collection and analysis for community research and evaluation. Christina's passion is helping people make a difference on socially important issues. Christina received her master's degree in human development, child and developmental psychology from the University of Kansas. Christina, thank you so much for sharing your time with us today, and I look forward to learning lots and lots myself. And I am going to have Chad give you the permission so you have control of our screen.
Great. Well, it is such a pleasure to be with you all today. Thank you so much for inviting me. I just want to say that, it's been truly our honor and privilege to, sorry, my slideshow is being wonky on me here, but it's been our honor and privilege to be a partner with the Kansas Prevention Collaborative over the years, and I just really appreciate the chance to share these resources with you from the Community Toolbox to hopefully help support some of the important work that you all are doing in behavioral health here in Kansas. So thank you all so much for inviting me to be here with you today. We really believe that in order to improve the outcomes that matter so much to us and to our communities, including behavioral health and a number of other issues, it's really when we work together collaboratively across sectors with different folks in the community that we can really make the progress that is needed. And so the Community Toolbox is all about how to strengthen the skill set needed for working together with diverse partners who have different interests and being able to make progress on those issues that we care about. So just a quick bit about our center, and some of you may be familiar already. You might know my colleagues, Dr. Jamela Watson-Thompson and Dola Gabriel. But the mission of our center is really supporting community health and development broadly. And when we talk about community health, we're using the World Health Organization definition of health, which really includes not merely the absence of disease or infirmity, but really the state of complete, mental and social and spiritual health and well-being. So really, really broad there. And so we support community health and development through participatory research and evaluation of community-based efforts, of course, teaching and training here at the university and beyond, and technical support and capacity building. So gosh, it's been actually since 1995 that we've been working on this vision through the Community Toolbox. The vision that people both locally here in the state of Kansas, around the US and all around the world would be able to take action together to change conditions that affect their lives. And so the Toolbox was really created as kind of a research to practice, knowledge dissemination vehicle. You know that there's so much that's known about under what conditions communities can be successful bringing about change and improvement, and also tools and resources that can help make that a little easier and more likely to be successful. And so the Toolbox has been our way to really distill what's known in the field and make that freely available in an open source way for communities around the state and around the world. This framework that you see in front of you is a framework for collaborative action for improving health and development. And this framework can be used really to address any sort of community-based issue. And you'll probably notice some similarities to other models you might be familiar with, the strategic prevention framework, for example. But this is sort of a working model that we developed and that we utilize as sort of a underpinning for the work that we support in communities. So if you see there at A, it really starts with a deep understanding of what the community needs are through assessing community needs and assets available to address those needs, as well as hand in hand working with the community to really prioritize what issues matter to them and engaging those most affected in both the assessment, prioritization, and planning process for improvement. And then that leads to implementation of strategic and action plans or targeted action, leading to changes in community systems and community conditions, so those policy, system, and environmental changes, ultimately leading to change in behaviors that we care about and addressing those risk and protective factors, and ultimately, making those population health improvements that we're all passionate about. And I should just say that the Toolbox has a number of resources kind of all along that path from the very beginning of when you're just starting to draw people together around an issue to beginning that assessment, all the way through to, sustaining the effort over time so that you can achieve those population health improvements. We know that this is not rocket science. However, there are a lot of real challenges that that communities face when doing this type of collaborative work. Sometimes we find that communities just need to learn some basic kind of skills for bringing people together and supporting collaborative efforts. Sometimes there are problems that people are encountering in their community efforts, and so they're looking for some guidance. And of course, the beauty of an online resource is that we can make it available for free, and it's available at any time. So, if you're getting ready to plan some focus groups and you want to just brush up on the basics, you can go to those resources and they'll be there when you need them. We do, from our website and also on YouTube, we have a short video that introduces the Community Toolbox as a free resource that's available to folks. So if you are interested, we certainly welcome folks to share. It's like a 2.5-minute video if you're ever interested in including it in a meeting or sharing it with colleagues to let people know that the resources are available to them. What I am going to do is walk you through some of the features of the site. I'll be using a slide deck, but then we'll pull the actual site up. And if anyone has any questions about specific resources you'd be interested in seeing, I can pull those up, and I'll also just kind of call your attention to some of the resources that might be highly relevant for your efforts. So we're really proud that the Toolbox actually is available in English and Spanish and Arabic. And just earlier this year, a Farsi version of the Community Toolbox launched. So we're making it more accessible to folks around the world. The Toolbox is arranged around kind of several different meta tools, if you will. So we have a table of contents that outlines detailed how-to guidance on a number of skills. We also have toolkits, troubleshooting guides, and links to evidence-based practices that you might be interested in accessing as you're looking for potential interventions or evidence-based practices to propose in a grant application, etc. There are hundreds of topics that are included in the toolbox, such as assessing community needs and resources, how to grow local leadership, increasing membership and participation in the efforts, tactical skills like how to write a successful grant application and the component parts you might need for your grant application, such as a logic model, how to engage in advocacy efforts and different forms of advocacy, interacting with elected officials, evaluation, and of course, sustaining the project over time and different tactics for that. There are all kinds of folks who utilize the toolbox. We've tried to make it in common language and accessible and hopefully not too much jargon. So we do find that it's utilized a lot by community members and grassroots volunteers. It's also utilized as a classroom reading for folks in public health, community psychology, macro social work, and other kind of applied fields. It's used by people who are providing training or technical assistance, and also by different NGOs and nonprofits and some different agencies that we partner with who are trying to build capacity at scale. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. You know, I don't think it was ever even it's beyond our wildest dreams that the toolbox would have become the international resource that it is today. Because of that, in 2004, our center was designated as a World Health Organization collaborating center for community health and development. And the toolbox reaches about 5 million people each year from all around the world, which makes that accessibility from tablets and mobile devices and availability in multiple languages and culturally adapted as well, that much more critical. We're actually working on an endowment right now to sustain the toolbox into the future. I wanted to share this quote with you just to show just one person who's working in behavioral health and the value that she has found in utilizing the toolbox. She says, I can't tell you how many times I have referred to the toolbox to help me get down to the real tools needed to complete steps in a process. There is nothing out there more comprehensive and easy to use. So this is just a snapshot of the table of contents, and there are actually 46 chapters. This is much like an encyclopedia, actually. It's organized by chapters, and then if you drill down into the chapters, there are a number of sections and real-world examples. So we'll take a look at the structure. The nice thing is, even though there's a lot of content there, it is all organized consistently. So hopefully that will help with navigation and finding what you need. So if you click on any one of those chapters, you'll get something that looks like this, that lists a number of sections related to the overall skill. So in this case, this is actually one of our most popular resources on assessing community needs. You'll see that there are a number of methods that are covered here. So if you're thinking about doing a community needs assessment, what are some of the types of methods you might want to employ? And so this goes into things like, how do you conduct a public forum? How do you conduct focus groups? How do you interview key informants in the community? Or how do you conduct a SWOT analysis of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats? Or how do you engage residents in a photo voice project, for example? So then if you click on any one of these sections, let's say you want to learn more about photo voice, you will get into the main content. So it will basically every section is organized very similarly, with just giving you the overview of what is this, why it could be helpful, and then the really tactical stuff of when might you use it and how, and walking you through the how-to steps. Almost every section has real-world examples of people who have put this into place in their own communities. There's also a checklist. So if you click on the checklist, it will kind of run you through the key highlights in this section. What you see if you go to the examples is you'll find different communities, both locally and internationally, that have addressed different issues utilizing, in this case, photo voice. And if we were to scroll down on the page, there's a number of examples, and some of them have videos and photos, which is nice also. And then every single section has a free downloadable PowerPoint. So if you're interested in taking the resource and doing some local capacity building training, we welcome you to do that. And one of our kind of core beliefs is making the resources open source so that they can be available to folks who can use them. And as you might imagine, being at the university, we do not have a large budget for marketing and promotion of the resource, so we love it when people share the Community Toolbox resources with others. In terms of the toolkits, those are more of kind of a Cliff Notes version of 16 really critical competencies for community work. And you'll see those competencies listed here. If you go into the toolkits, what you'll see, in this case, Toolkit 5 around strategic and action planning, you'll see an outline that walks you just step by step, no fluff, through what the major steps are. And then also, if you want to dig more deeply into any of the areas, you can click on and kind of drill down into deeper resources that will go into more detail. Let's say, for example, on how to involve people that are most affected by the problem. And then each toolkit also has examples. And you'll see here we have examples ranging from Kansas to Kenya, and all sorts of examples. And the nice thing about this is it sort of helps you see how different communities have taken the concept and utilized and implemented it and adapted it for their own context, whether it's urban or rural or a lower or higher resource laden context. There's also the troubleshooting guide, which we know sometimes people are looking for guidance because community work can be challenging. And so we have listed 14 of the most common problems that we've learned from communities over the years are encountered. And so things like, there's not enough participation, or we're facing opposition or conflict, or there's not enough action to promote change. So people can reflect on which kind of barrier might be closest to their own situation, and then they can drill down to walk through some questions for reflection and some support resources. So in this case, facing opposition or conflict, thinking through, do we know who our opponents are and why they're opposing us? What tactics they're using? Do we have a plan? Is our group unified and free of internal conflicts, etc.? And so any of these that are resonating, people can then access the related resources. We find that this troubleshooting guide can be really helpful for providing technical assistance as well. And then we know that often grant makers, for example, are wanting and looking for people to use best practices, evidence-based approaches. And so while we do not maintain these lists ourselves, we link to a number of web-based resources that have different approaches that have research behind them. So things like the community guide, etc. We also have a resource on the Toolbox called Ask an Advisor, and I know you all have some great technical assistance available to you. But for those who don't have that available, community members can come and pose questions about the barriers they might be facing or if they're looking for additional guidance. And we have a team of community psychologists and those really experienced in community efforts who volunteer on a rotating basis to answer questions that come in and provide additional resources and kind of personalized assistance. We've also held some what we call out-of-the-box prizes, which are really lifting up stories of community innovation and how people have come together collaboratively to take action on issues that matter to them. And so we have a whole collection of community stories that are also available on the Community Toolbox. So for example, the Charter for Compassion International built a charter toolbox to really encourage people to adopt compassionate communities charters all around the world. And there's lots of other inspiring stories. You can also search by topic area and by region of the world. You see this map here. Just a reminder that the resources are available in Spanish and in some of the other languages. We've really tried hard to make the resources available from in a responsive design. And then here you'll see a number of our partners that we work with to provide these resources to their constituents. So we're really happy and proud, for example, that the Peace Corps utilizes Community Toolbox training resources for some Peace Corps staff and volunteers. Also, we've partnered with Healthy People 2020, who utilizes the MAP-IT framework we'll look at here in a moment. But these are different groups who basically utilize the resources to help support their own efforts. What you'll see if you go to Healthy People 2020 is their framework for change is MAP-IT. And if you click on any one of those phases of the work, for example, mobilize, you will see a number of resources around some healthy people resources, some kind of reflection questions about mobilizing. And then if you scroll down, a number of resources from the Community Toolbox to really help support that implementation. And of course, this kind of partnership is really welcome because it helps us with our mission of getting these resources into the hands of more people who can use them. So there are a lot of actual opportunities for collaboration. Of course, first of all, I appreciate the opportunity to let you all know that these resources are here, that you're welcome to take and use them for your own work and also to support your efforts. We also welcome and we're constantly curating material and adding it to the site. If you have any suggested edits or if you have stories that you think would be great to add either as examples for some of the different skills covered in the toolbox or even the community stories that are a little bit broader stories of the Assess, Plan, Act, Implement, and sustain. We would welcome those kind of submissions as a way to lift up and celebrate those stories and also make them available to people around the world. We also have actually worked with a whole team of volunteer translators who have helped with making the resources more broadly available to others. That actually started, we had Peace Corps volunteers who were utilizing the resources in Spanish-speaking countries, translating them and using them, and then they would email them back to us just so that we had them. And so that's how the translation got started. And so there's probably a lot of other potential forms of collaboration as well. But what I would like to do at this point is just pull up the Community Toolbox itself. So hopefully you all can see this okay. Um, this is the home page. We've kind of talked about some of the different ways into the toolbox, the table of contents, and the toolkits. So if we go under Learn a Skill here, for example, to the table of contents, this is where we will see those different chapters. I mentioned that the assessment chapter is really popular. The strategic and action planning resources are also heavily utilized. One thing that you might be interested to know is that under Chapter 2, we have a number of popular models featured. And so, for example, the Strategic Prevention Framework is one of the models that is featured. Collective Impact, Map It, and County Health Rankings and Roadmaps, Take Action Cycle. So if you're interested in looking at, for example, some of the resources that the Toolbox has for implementing the Strategic Prevention Framework, you are more than welcome to kind of peruse through that, and you'll see not only explanation of the Strategic Prevention Framework, but then also quite a bit of how-to resources around the various phases of the prevention framework. And I won't take you through all of that, but just so that you know it's there, we'll go back to the table of contents here. There's also things around how to work with volunteers, how to improve your organizational structure, things around group facilitation, and also resources around cultural competence. We have a new chapter on spirituality and community building, which covers things such as compassion, charity, forgiveness, and reconciliation. And so we've partnered with the Charter for Compassion and some other colleagues to help create these resources, if any of those are of interest. And then there's quite a bit here on advocacy. So for example, if you're wanting to look at different potential tactics for advocacy, you can, registering voters, for example, there are lots of things available there. There's also resources around how to celebrate progress and reward accomplishments, lots around evaluation, and then resources on planning for sustainability. So, for example, what are different tactics that can be used, and then going into detail on some of these various sustainability tactics. So, in addition to the table of contents, there's the toolkit, those 16 core competencies that I mentioned are kind of a Cliff Notes version of the resources. And there are, if we go into developing an intervention, for example, you'll see the kinds of things that are listed there, and a number of examples that are available. This first one was created by someone who is working with youth in a Palestinian refugee camp. It's some really interesting work that they did. And then some of the other features that we were talking about, the troubleshooting guide and the best change processes, databases of best practices, those are all available under the Help Taking Action area of the site. So you'll see here that there's comprehensive resources listed, and then down below there's also quite a few resources that are listed in different categorical areas. Of course, we welcome you to stay connected with us. We have a guest book where we hear from people all around the world that are doing community work. We have a newsletter that we put out to make people aware of new resources and kind of share important news. So we welcome you to subscribe to that. This is also where you can learn from those community stories from the community innovators around the world that we were mentioning earlier. So what I'd like to do now is if anyone has any questions about any specific resources or would like for me to pull up anything in more detail, I'd be glad to answer any of those type of questions. And I believe the best way to do that would be just to enter those into the chat there.
Christina, if any of those questions come up, we'll be sure and share those with you. You've been doing such a great job of giving us a tour of the toolbox. There were very few questions as you were going along. I think everyone was glued to their screen, so we might give them a second to think. And,
absolutely. You know, one thing that I will share, I was sharing some of the partners that we work with. We have this Build Your Toolbox link, and this is, you know, free for groups to do. But if you all work with or know of any groups that are trying to bring about change and improvement and might find it helpful to link into some of the specific resources from the toolbox, there's more information on kind of how that works here on this Build Your Toolbox page. We also have some resources about the toolbox. If anyone is interested, for example, in sharing about the resources at a coalition meeting or something like that, all of the flyers about the toolbox are available, and you're welcome to download those or share them electronically to let people know about the resources that are available. One thing that I didn't share is we do have a really basic kind of model for getting started. So I do realize that the 7,000 pages can be both a blessing and a curse, so can be a little bit overwhelming. And if you go to, under Help Taking Action, if you go to the model for getting started, this is just a really basic way to think about community work and how to begin taking action. And so we have just a simple list of some of the most relevant resources available under each phase of the work. So if you find this a helpful way to think about what resources might be most relevant to you in the stage of work that you're in, this is sort of an alternative way to drill down into the resources that are available. And then as I was mentioning about the examples, if I take you into the photo voice one, for example, and you can see the different examples that are here. If your community, for example, has done photo voice, or you know of someone who's done a good job implementing that, we're continually collecting stories and would love to continue adding to the examples that are there to really provide additional guidance and also inspiration for people who are wanting to make a difference. Heather or Chad, is there anything else that that you all would like me to cover? I think that kind of concludes the main content that I had hoped to share today.
Christina, I'm just really impressed with and being resolved, I should say, if that's a word, resolved, that I really need to get back onto the Toolbox. There is just a wealth of information and free resources. I don't know if you can say it often enough that these resources are free and really user-friendly. I am just really impressed. Again, I've used the Toolbox a number of times, but I always forget that there's so many other great things on here. I think you've done a fabulous job of really giving us that tour. And I'm really, like I say, I think I have a renewed determination to spend some more time looking at the other resources that are available and making sure that my peers and making sure that those communities that especially don't have any funding are aware that this resource exists, because, I mean, it's right at the tip of your fingertips, and maybe you may have the expense of the paper of printing that out, but the knowledge is there and the information is there. So thank you so much. This was really great.